Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Unexpected Emergencies by blueh. Luffy had been alone most of his short life, with no one to love and no one to rely on. This all changed, however, when the Whitebeard pirates stumble upon his lonely little island and take the 4-year-old boy under their wing. Who knew that the little rubber brat would become one of Oyaji's strongest commanders when he grew up? Ha! The Whitebeard pirates sure didn't. Huge shout out to all the warlords of this channel. You know who you are. Want to stand among legends? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios!
Thatch. Luffy. A voice called out in the early morning. Give my back my damn left shoes. Behind a barrel up on deck, the said boys were laughing at the latest prank they pulled. The older Luffy got, the more fun it was for Thatch. Luffy was small and fast, so he could help pull off things that Thatch could never dream of pulling off, such as stealing fore and his division's left shoes. Honestly, it was a simple prank, but it worked. And it was hilarious to everyone else. Thatch had to shove Luffy's face into the wooden floor to keep the child from blowing their cover as fore and several of his division mates came up on the deck, surprising Ace from a narcoleptic attack. Of course, all of them only had one shoe on, or they didn't have shoes at all. Most came out in their white or multicolored socks that were reasonably strange. The cook even swore that one of the men was wearing kitten socks. He had to bit his lip to keep from laughing as fore charged Ace, grabbing the fire user by his pants, since he never seems to wear a shirt, and shook him until the man's knife fell from its sheath. Were they? He practically roared. You better not be involved in this, portgus, or I'm going to rip your head off and throw it in the ocean. This is why Thatch and Luffy loved to prank the 15th Division commander. He always gave the best reactions to things. Though, the only downside is when they get caught. He really beats them up pretty bad. Luffy not as much, seeing as he's only 8 and everyone believes that Thatch is mind controlling the boy to do his bidding. The commander can really pack a punch. Luckily he hasn't pulled out his sword and set it on fire like he does when he's pissed. Thatch, let me go. Luffy hissed quietly, struggling against the hand that was pinning him to the deck. He was probably tired of his face being squashed into the deck anyway. Thatch released his hand and the 8-year-old popped right back up, trying to catch his breath. When he did, the boy gave the older man a dull glare. That was mean, he whispered. Meanie Thatch. I'm not a meanie, Thatch hissed back. Who's the reason that you aren't caught yet? Me. Stingy. The boy protested, this time a bit louder than Thatch would have liked. Fore and his division commanders didn't seem to notice, seeing as they were all too busy harassing Ace. Thatch almost felt bad for the fire user, almost. He wished he had a video den mushi. I'm bored, Luffy sang quietly, crossing his small arms over his chest. Thatch, can I go now? If you want to get caught by fore, go right ahead. Thatch replied easily, keeping his eyes on his poor victims. Let's see how badly that'll end. Jackass, Luffy muttered, lips forming into a pout that only the 8-year-old knew how to make. Goddammit. Leave me alone. Ace finally snapped, increasing Thatch's interest and keeping Luffy quiet for a few more minutes. Most of the time they hid behind those barrels after they've done a prank. Okay. Geez, Ace huffed, pointing to the exact place that Thatch and Luffy were hiding at the moment. Just because he's one of my best friends doesn't mean I help him with every prank he comes up with. Bastards. Damn it, Ace. Thatch cursed as he stood up from his hiding spot, offering a grin. Everyone spotted him immediately and sent him dark looks, Luffy included. Well, what a nice day we're having, isn't it? I'll just be taking my leave now. With that, he darted so fast off the deck that even Naruto would be jealous. Luffy stood there blinking at the spot that his friend disappeared from. He was blissfully unaware of the murderous auras that hovered over him until he looked up. The 8-year-old, not even knowing that he was knocking on death's door, looked at fore straight in the eyes with a completely serious expression and said, I didn't do it. Fore knew better than to hurt Luffy, so he settled for bending down to the boy's eye level. Which was quite hard, mind you. He isn't exactly small. Luffy. The said boy looked away from him, whistling innocently. Luffy, look at me. Slowly, Luffy turned his head and stared at the man in the eyes, squeaking out a small, sorry. The older man sighed. Stay away from Thatch when he's pranking, okay? He's a bad influence. Really? Luffy tilted his head to the side, cutely. But it's a lot of fun when me and Thatch are watching you scream. What? Nothing. Luffy cried out suddenly, covering his mouth with his hands. I didn't say nothing. Luffy, Fosa warned. Quit pranking our division. Now, where are our shoes? Thatch threw half of them off the ship, Luffy informed them, ignoring the looks of rage that were suddenly appearing on the 15th division. The other half are in the trash can below deck. Fosa groaned. Why'd he throw them overboard? The boy blinked up at the man. I think he said something about seeing them swim like ducks, but I'm not sure. Thatch just did it. And you laughed while he was doing this crime? Fosa felt like he was interrogating the younger, though Luffy was being quite cooperative. The boy giggled, throwing his hands over his lips to smother any sounds that would leave his mouth. Yep, it was funny. Fosa rolled his eyes, picking up Luffy's straw hat and slamming it onto the boy's head. Luffy just grinned up at him with a light that Fosa had never seen before he met Luffy. You little shit. He had permanently changed them all, whether they knew it or not. When the whistling of the cannonballs started, Luffy wasn't worried. After all, attacks on the Moby were common. People were always challenging Oyaji for his head and they'd come back even after the crew kicked their asses. Oi, Luffy, you going to come watch? One of his siblings asked as they rushed past him, weapon in hand. Luffy grinned at them and jumped to his feet, racing after them. He wasn't allowed to fight quite yet, his brothers didn't trust his aim. He'd probably end up hitting an ally before he hit an enemy. Luffy didn't care too much, though, because he was getting stronger. Soon he'd be able to fight with his family. Marines. On deck, everyone was running around, preparing for the battle. A few were grinning, making bets on how long it would take while others simply stared at the ship in annoyance. Luffy spotted Marco at the top of the crow's nest, watching the ship carefully. Ace was leaning against the side of the rail, rolling his eyes. Seeing that neither of his brothers were worried, Luffy relaxed and jogged over to Oyaji. Oyaji. He hopped onto his giant father's chair with a grin. His father welcomed him before going back to watching his sons prepare. The marine ship was only a few hundred meters away at this point and everyone was ready for the battle. Prepare to board, Whitebeard shouted, his voice echoing across the deck. Luffy's family shouted their agreement in return, weapons raised high. The ships hit each other only minutes later and the battle raged on. Luffy laughed in joy as his siblings demolished the Marines. So far, none of the Marines had managed to step foot on the Moby. Most of the commanders had taken a backseat and were instead focusing on better, more important things. Like playing poker on the sake barrel in Kingdu and Fosa's case. Fire. The cry didn't come from anyone he recognized and Luffy only had a moment to think before an explosion went off and the ship rocked violently to the side. He tumbled off of Oyaji's chair and landed with an oof, bouncing on deck until he could regain control of his body. What was that? The Moby was hit, damn those Marines. In the confusion, the Marines had taken the time to board the ship. The Whitebeard pirates were slowly losing the advantage as another explosion went off. Luffy had enough time to prepare himself so he didn't fall again. He wasn't worried too much about the ship. It was Adam's wood after all. Flamenco had explained that Adam's wood was tougher than normal wood and could easily withstand gunfire and cannonballs. Besides, he knew in the attack. He didn't know how he could tell, just something in his gut saying that she was alright. A brat? The voice shook him out of his thoughts and Luffy glanced up at the Marine who easily towered over him. What the hell? I'm Luffy. Luffy grinned at him. Before the Marine could respond, Luffy punched him in the face and sent him over the side of the ship. Oi, Luffy, what the hell are you doing out here? The boy was scooped into someone's arms before he even got a chance to respond. Looking up, he saw Blenheim and grinned. The man's massive sword hung in his other hand as he continued to slice down Marines even after picking up the 7-year-old. Fell off of Oyaji's chair. Luffy grinned at him before climbing the massive man's back and sitting on his shoulders. Blenheim didn't seem to mind at all and Luffy was enjoying the view. Damn these Marines, Blenheim muttered as he dodged another attack. Wrecking our ship like this. Flamenco isn't going to be happy. Luffy laughed, nodding. The ship's main shipwright was good at what he did, and while it was easy to fix, having to do this once a week was annoying to anyone. It felt like the Moby was always under construction. Luffy shifted, trying to get a better position to see the battle. Briefly, he saw the large purple tattoo of his older brother. Happily, Luffy cried out, "Ace." The words fell deaf to the sounds of the battle. Blenheim turned to look and also spotted the 2nd Division commander in the crowd. Ace had his back turned to them, unaware. Luffy spotted the danger before Blenheim did. "Ace, watch out." Two men, both strong, Luffy could feel it, were steadily approaching the 2nd Division commander. Ace, who was too distracted with his own battle, didn't seem to know they were there. "Ace," Blenheim shouted, cutting down Marines left and right as he tried to reach his friend. Luffy jumped down from the man's shoulders and raced between the legs of the surrounding Marines. He could see Ace ahead but was still too far away. "No, Ace." They brought their weapons up and Luffy could see the hockey reflect in the sunlight. His eyes widened and his stomach dropped. No, he had to stop them before, but it was too late. Everything seemed to go in slow motion as the Marines brought their weapons down. Ace turned, eyes widening. He knew he didn't have enough time to dodge. No, stop it. A huge wave of hockey burst from his body, so strong that it cracked the rails. The battlefield was silent as those on deck fell to the ground, unconscious. Both Marines and pirates couldn't stand in the wake of the will that rocked the ship. Luffy, Ace was looking at him and Luffy couldn't tell that he was thinking. He stared at his hands for a moment before deciding that he didn't care. Ace was safe and that was all that mattered. That was King's hockey. Oh shit, Whitebeard is pissed. Retreat. It didn't take long before the Marines had gathered their dead and wounded and fled. The pirates didn't chase them, instead choosing to stare at the 8-year-old that just displayed King's hockey of all things. Holy shit, Thatch muttered. Marco signed and rubbed his face. Of all the things to have. Whitebeard laughed and gestured for Luffy to come. He did, not quite understanding why everyone was giving him weird stares. Whitebeard took notice and smiled before turning to his sons. "Clean the deck, tend to the wounded." Am I in trouble?" Luffy asked as he climbed his father's chair. "No, Brad, you're not in trouble," Whitebeard told him. "You know what that was, right?" "Hockey," Luffy said, nodding. "Like Oyaji and Ace's hockey." "Yes," Whitebeard smiled. "Marco too. That was King's hockey. To unlock it so young, you're strong, son." Luffy practically glowed under the praise, giggling. He pulled his hat over his head, barely covering the smile that spit his face. He was happy. "I learned from the best." Whitebeard laughed, standing up with the boy in his hand. "Come, your King's hockey training will start tomorrow." When Marco sighed for the 5th time one day at a bar, Luffy knew better to annoy him with his hunger. The man might have had a relatively calm temper, but Luffy could tell when he was about to snap. The little 8-year-old boy almost felt sorry for whom he was about to beat up. Marco lifted him up on the bar stool and ruffled his hair. "Stay here," he said before walking over to the door and slamming it open. Marco glanced back at the boy. "I'm serious, Luffy, don't move." With that, he was gone. Luffy didn't even remember what Marco said he was going to do, something about Thatch and fish. The boy started picking at his food, suddenly not hungry anymore. He didn't like eating when he was alone. It felt wrong. There were other people at the bar, but none of them looked like people that Luffy would want to approach. When 10 minutes passed and Marco still hadn't show up to get him, Luffy was starting to get worried. He knew Marco was strong, and that really wasn't the problem. Luffy was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, the pineapple had forgot about him and everyone else was about to leave without him. Some of the other men in the bar had taken a notice to the squirming boy and grinned evilly, not that Luffy had noticed. It wasn't until a hand wrapped around his waist that he felt the presence of other not-so-nice oars around him. He yelped, struggling immediately. These hands were unknown. Foreign. Luffy didn't like it. Another hand came and wrapped itself around his small torso as he was yanked upwards, out of his seat. He definitely didn't like this. One of the men cooed with a sick grin on his face. "What a cute little boy we have here. Not a place for a child to be, you know. Where's your mommy, kid?" Why does everyone ask that? Luffy thought. a frown coming on his face as he glared at the man that was trying to talk to him. "I don't have one, bastard." "Oh," another one of them grinned. "You got a pretty big potty mouth for such a little boy." "Shut up," Luffy snapped, struggling more ferociously than before. "Let me go." The man that was holding him whispered in Luffy's ear. "Boss would like something to have at the auction." Luffy didn't like the sound of that. "I ain't your slave, jackass," he yelled, aiming a kick for the man's face. "I'm a pirate, pirates are free." "Pirate, huh?" The man laughed. "How can a cute little thing like you be a harsh, ugly pirate? Us bandits are so much better." Luffy snarled as the other men laughed. "Come on, kid. Let's get you cleaned up, Having enough, Luffy bit down on the man that was holding him, hard enough to draw blood. The man screamed and dropped him to the ground, yelling stuff that Luffy didn't care to understand. He had to get out of here. He silently sent an apology to Marco as he ran for the front door of the bar. The Phoenix had told him to stay here, but he wasn't about to become a slave for these filthy bandits. Two of the men from earlier stepped in front of him, blocking his escape exit. Luffy snarled again, skidding to a stop right in front of them and even dodging one of their grubby hands as they tried to manhandle him again. He turned around and darted for the back door, this time not even stopping when three other men stood in his way. He just barreled right through them, flinging the door off of its hinges. He heard yelling behind him, but Luffy didn't look back. He just kept running towards the forest that lay in front of him. In the back of his head, the forest looked similar to the one that he had only vague memories of back before Ace, Marco and Thatch had found him. He was pretty sure that going into the forest was a much better decision than going back to the town streets where the bandits could still be roaming around. The boy just kept running even after the sounds of the town were long gone, replaced by the birds chirping and leaves rustling under his feet. Luffy didn't stop until he heard the giggling. It was quiet, almost non-existent besides. Whoever was in front of him didn't sound like a bandit. It sounded calming, nice. He let out a puff of air, trying to get his lungs to get the necessary air that they needed before he started stalking towards the quiet giggle. The tree line faded until a clearing revealed itself. A small creek was on the other side, something that Luffy took note of. Even if it wasn't deep, things like that could be deadly to a devil fruit user. There were small rocks that littered around the clearing and one big rock in the center. On top of that rock was a woman with kind eyes. She was around 20 with dark, black hair that reached down to her shoulders and piercing blue eyes that stared at him just as he stared back. A large book rested in her lap and her mouth curved into a small, yet forced smile. She jumped down from the rock where she had been reading before and cautiously approached him. Feeling not malicious intent for her, Luffy let the woman approach. When she was close enough, she bent down and ruffled his hair, something that Luffy was used to by now. After all, most of the commanders and other crew members messed with his hair frequently, especially Ace and Thatch. "Hello," her voice even sounded calming. "Are you lost?" Luffy nodded his head a bit, causing the woman to giggle. Her vibrant blue eyes held amusement, though Luffy could see the pain that was lining around the edges. His expression turned confused. Who had hurt such a nice lady? "My name is Robin," the woman, Robin said carefully, like she was expecting a reaction from him. Luffy had to say that the name sounded familiar, but he couldn't really place it. It was just a first name after all. There were probably a lot of Robins on the Grand Line anyways. "I'm Luffy," he chirped out, forcing his confusion to the back of his mind. "Nay, Robin, what's your full name?" "It's rude to ask for someone's full name when you haven't given yours first," Robin said, standing up and wrapping her slender arms around his waist, taking him up with her. "Oops," Luffy giggled, causing the woman to smile. "I don't know my full name. Everyone just calls me Luffy." "Oh," Robin's eyes sparkled. "Alright then. I suppose I should tell you my full name then?" Luffy nodded his head enthusiastically. "My name is Nico Robin." The pieces clicked into place for Luffy. After all, the Devil Child's name was well known all around the world. Ace liked to talk about her and laugh, saying that they were one and the same. Luffy never really got what he was talking about. "You're the demon of Ohara, right?" Luffy knew it was the wrong thing to say as soon as Robin's face became dark and her smile dropped. Luffy blinked, not understanding why she seemed to upset all of a sudden. A monster? Robin bit her lip, her grip on Luffy's waist going slack as if she was letting him a chance to escape from her grasp. Luffy didn't want to move however, and stared at her face. Yes, she replied quietly, I am. Did the government cause this much pain? Rage coursed through his blood, and even though he was only 8, he could understand the feeling of the world hating you. The government making up lies to cover the truth that they so desperately wanted to get rid of. Suddenly, Luffy smiled brightly, hugging her. His skinny arms wrapped around her neck. Then we can be monsters together. Robin gasped when he didn't run away, screaming and crying. She was surprised when the kid's face went blank and assumed the worst, so she hid her face. But then he hugged her. He had hugged her and told her that they could be monsters together. Impossible. This was just a kid, an innocent, naive kid whom believed anything that someone told him. He didn't know about her truth. He didn't know about her lies. He didn't know about her past. He didn't know about her. But he knew more than she originally thought. They'd always call me a monster, Luffy blabbed, his small arms tightening around her neck. Robin didn't mind. Didn't care. Then when I found my family they called me even more of a monster. Said as long as I was with them, I was the worst of the world. He pulled away and Robin was surprised to see him still smiling, even if there were tears in his eyes. But I don't care anymore. They're my family. My nakama. As long as someone is there, I don't care. He understood her, but not completely. She didn't have nakama, didn't have a family. Some people are just stupid, Luffy said with such ferocity that it took Robin a second to digest what he had said. They call us monsters just because we're strong. Because we ate a devil fruit. Just because we're different. Robin raised an eyebrow as her facade slowly coming back into place. You have a devil fruit? The boy nodded and pulled on the side of his face, stretching it farther than humanly possibly. I ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi. I'm a rubber man. He blinked up at her. Do you have a devil fruit? Hesitating for a brief second, Robin freed one of her arms and created a few more, making it look like a pinwheel. I ate the Hana Hana no Mi. Luffy gaped at her arm, his eyes sparkling with a sense of joy that Robin had never seen. That's so cool, you can make parts of your body? Robin nodded, allowing a small smile to appear on her lips. This child has different, not like the rest. For a second, she wondered just what had changed him. Are you sure you don't want to join us, Robin? Luffy had asked for the 10th time in the past hour as they reached the edge of the forest. We'd all love to have you. She set the boy on the ground, squatting so she could see his dark eyes that sparkled with so much life that it made Robin a bit envious. I can't, she replied. I have to complete my dream, okay. But we could help you, Luffy protested, wrapping his arms around his waist and not letting go. All of us, Marco, Thatch, Haruta, even Oyaji. She detached the pitiful-looking boy from her waist. I'm sorry, Luffy. I'd get you hurt. There are too many enemies in my dream. He looked at her with the puppy dog eyes of doom, and Robin sighed, not wanting to upset the young boy. Luffy, I can't. Maybe one day we'll meet again. The boy's face lit up. Really, promise, Robin? He held out his pinky finger, looking at her expectantly. Robin quietly laughed, crossing pinkies with the boy. When you grow up, come and find me. I'll be waiting. If you still accept me, if you'll still love me, it's a promise, he declared happily. One day, I'll set out and find you, Robin. Then we can beat up your enemies together, right? He grinned with such light that Robin didn't really want to agree. What if someone dimmed it? What if someone would dim his smile? But he had latched onto her and he wasn't letting go just yet. He wouldn't let her leave. Yes, we can. The next thing Luffy said was one thing that Robin would carry with her for the rest of her life. Life might end, but nakama are forever. You're my nakama, Robin. There is nothing more ridiculous than being in this world alone. Someday you'll meet brave friends who will protect you. Go and live with them, Robin. No, she couldn't. Not yet, for she still had a dream to complete. Enemies to defeat. A life to survive. She stood up and left, after he said that, giving him one last pat on the head. She didn't even realize she was crying until she felt something warm drip down her cheeks. She gently touched her face, fascinated by the emotions that she hadn't shown in years. Was that boy really her friend? Or was he just another fake? But that smile. No, it was too real to be fake. Those sparkling eyes were too magical to be pretend. She finally had her first nakama. A little boy that would grow into something that the world has never seen before. A little boy that will change so many lives. A little boy that will grow into a man that will change this world. "Hey, Luffy," Ace called out, stretching his hands over his head as he stared up at the stars. Ace had night watch that night and Luffy, not wanting his brother to be out there alone, came with him. Luffy didn't really stay up like he did, pretty much falling asleep as soon as his head hit Ace's stomach. Ace didn't really mind this, however. In fact, he enjoyed the presence of his little brother, even if the little boy was about to pass out. The 9-year-old little boy lifted his head, blinking up at Ace with those huge, tried, owl-like eyes that normal held so much light that it was impossible to be sad around him. "Have I ever told you about my hometown?" the fire user asked, even if he knew the answer already. "Nope," the boy yawned, snuggling into Ace's bare stomach as if he were trying to get comfortable. "Really?" the fire user grinned up at the sky. "I guess it wasn't really a hometown. More of a jungle. I grew up with mountain bandits." "That explains your personality," Luffy muttered, eyes still closed. Ace whopped the boy's head. "Oi. That was uncalled for." Luffy shook, trying to hold in his giggles. "But they were pretty nice, Dayton and her gang. They acted like they didn't care, but they did take in me and Sabo back when." His voice tried off, lowing at the thought of his long-lost brother. Sabo didn't deserve that. All he wanted to do was to be free. "Who's Sabo?" Luffy's voice was laced heavily with sleep, and for a second, Ace hesitated. Sabo wasn't someone that Ace would go around and talk about, but... The fire user thought about how he could answer this question, trying not to give too much away. "Sabo was my brother." Seeing Luffy's expression, he elaborated. "Before I met Oyaji and everyone. Sabo was really the first person to accept me for me. He died, though. Back when we were 10. "How? A celestial dragon," Ace muttered bitterly, not trying to hide his hate for the bastards. "I didn't see it, but one of the bandits did. Said that Sabo's boat was shot down just because. There wasn't a reason." "Assholes," Luffy muttered with a frown. The boy had heard tales of them, of course, but the commanders and his other brothers always kept him as far away from the celestial dragons as they could. Luffy is the only one of the ship that hadn't met on in real life, and everyone planned to keep it this way. They wouldn't let something as terrible as a celestial dragon taint their baby brother. The worst, Ace agreed. But Sabo, he died without freedom. We made a promise to become pirates when we were 17, but something happened and Sabo had to set sail early. He didn't even make it out of the harbor. It's cruel, but it's reality. People who don't deserve power are on top. I thought Oyaji liked Sengoku. Oyaji respects him, not likes him. Ace corrected the younger. Sengoku is possibly the only one with power that fair about it. He just does what he's supposed to do, and as pirates, we respect that. It's people like Akainu that we don't like." "Akainu?" Ace watched as Luffy furrowed his eyebrows, trying to figure out where that name came from. "Akainu is an admiral. Admiral Sakazuki." Ace answered with a yawn. "He's bad. Keeps going on about this stupid, absolute justice of his and will kill anything in his path. He doesn't care about Nakama." Luffy let out a silent growl. Doesn't care about loss of lives as long as he achieves what he wants. Why does he have that much power then? Because people are blind to the world. They can't detect truth from a lie, reality from fake. It's just like the celestial dragons. Everyone worships them and no one goes against them. Luffy hummed, making Ace's chest vibrate as he settled back down onto the fire user's stomach. People are stupid then. Ace looked at the child that they had raised since 4, able to see more of how the world actually works more than a grown man. For a second, a ghost of a smile appeared on Ace's face as the boy slowly drifted off to sleep. It was one of those times that Thatch had a brilliant plan and someone walked by and ruined the surprise. It was also one of those times where Thatch lucked out and found that it was only Haruta, one of the only commanders other than Ace and himself, that likes to pull a good prank every once in a while. "What are you doing?" she asked, crossing her arms over his flat chest. Her sword clicked quietly as if waiting to be used. Moving fast, Thatch put a hand over her mouth and pulled her down, pointing at the men's quarters. "Shush. We can't wake them up yet." She removed Thatch's hand and hissed back, "What are you going to pull now?" I'm going to put fireworks in Josu's shower. Thatch grinned with this maniac grin that would make any normal man fear for their lives. He stole my hair gel yesterday without asking, so this is revenge. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Haruto blinked. Though this sounds like fun, need any help? Luffy's distracting Josu while I sneak in and put the fireworks down his drain. Thatch answered. If this works, the fireworks will react to the water and explode. The bottom of the shower, if we're lucky, should hit Josu right when the sun doesn't shine. You know his crotch is made of diamonds, right? Shut up, Thatch complained. Diamonds or not, it still hurts to be hit there. Trust me on this. Okay. Luffy's the only one who doesn't think it hurts. Yeah, but he's rubber. Exactly, Thatch agreed, pulling another grin. Therefore, we can use him as bait while we go and set up the real trap, Thatch, you evil genius. Haruto quietly laughed. Alright, count me in. We've got a shower to blow up. Luffy. Izo said for the 4th time today, trying to get his pupil to listen to him for once. They had been training for an hour. Luffy had lost interest when they stopped starring so Izo could work on the 9-year-old's aim. Luffy, will you please pay attention? The boy tore his eyes away from the ocean that stretched for miles around them. Oh, sorry Izo. There was this really distracting whale. It was doing really cool flips and stuff. Luffy, you see whales all the time, Izo said, trying not to let his irritation seep through. You do not, however, train all the time, so pay attention. If you don't learn how to aim, then you can't fight Shanks, okay? That got the boy's attention. He looked at Izo with big eyes that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. Wah. What did you mean I can't fight Shanks? You'd end up hitting one of us, not your target, Izo sighed. I don't think that Jiru wants another punch in the stomach, agreed? He seemed fine. Yeah, until you left. Then he was out for the rest of the day. I don't think he was really hurt, though. Just trying to get out of his chores. Really? Yeah, Izo said, throwing a plate up in the air and catching it with mastered grace. Now, down to training. I'm going to throw this plate into the air and you're going to punch it, alright? It's one piece of meat off your next meal for every miss. Luffy whined, looking like the world was coming crashing down. Hey, you can't take away my meat. I will if you don't hit the plate, Izo threatened. And then we're going to work on armament hockey, alright? Slightly sulking, the 9-year-old pouted but nodded all the same. Good, Izo readied the plate and Luffy took up a defensive position. It was good, slightly off balance, but no of the other commanders could seem to correct it. It was like Luffy was creating his own fighting style. Go! Throwing 2 plates up in the air, the cross-dresser watched as Luffy hit one on the side, knocking it away and the other right in the bull's eyes. Izo clapped, knowing that the boy was improving quite a lot. At first, he couldn't even hit something that was a foot in front of him. They repeated the process a few times, Luffy only missing 3 of them. Izo, roughly impressed by his display, told him that he wouldn't take away the 9-year-old's meat for now, but he had to show him how he was doing on if he was making any progress at all. Luffy took up his strange defense position once again, putting his rubbery fist out in front of him. Izo leaned against the mast as he watched the boy concentrate, trying to active his haki. Luffy was rather good at observation haki, but his armament was lacking. Around a year ago, the Whitebeard pirates also found out that, surprisingly, their little brother possessed King's haki as well. It was a shock to all of them. Luffy grunted, grinning slightly as his fist turned a shiny black color. His eyes lit up in a way that made Izo know that the kid was proud of himself, proudly showing off his haki to everyone who was around. Ace, who had been on deck watching, grinned and said that he was getting stronger every day. Luffy seemed to practically glow at his compliment. After making sure that everyone saw his progress, the small boy bounded right back over to Izo, saying the one thing that the cross-dresser had been expecting the whole time. Can we eat now? Picking the kid up and slinging him over his shoulders, ignoring the muffled protests, Izo grinned. Yeah, sure. Let's go get you some grub, Brad. Luffy was pissed, and when Luffy was pissed, all hell broke loose. Not only did the government have the gall to kidnap some of the Whitebeard crewmates, they also had to go and torture them until they couldn't move. Luffy saw red, blatantly ignoring everyone when they had screamed for him to come back. The pirates had stopped at an island when their stock had gotten dangerously low, and despite it being a marine island, they really had no choice. It was almost an hour after Luffy had gotten back onto the ship after his exploring expedition, that he didn't get permission for, that he had heard the news. Members were disappearing. Thankfully, none of the commanders were gone yet, something that everyone was grateful for. Almost immediately, Oyaji had launched a counter-attack on the marine base, trying to free their downed comrades. Luffy had snuck out when no one was looking and went to join the fight. Ace spotted him right away, yelling at him to go back to the ship, but Luffy ignored him, taking out the nearest marine with a well-aimed Gumo Gumo no pistol to the stomach. The marine has dropped to the ground, lifeless. It was then that the other marines started ganging up on the boy, throwing things like knives and swords trying to see what would hurt him. In a fit of rage, Luffy had let loose some of his king's haki, successfully knocking out the marine officers and ending the fight. After a while of worrying over the boy, they had finally decided that the government didn't get any information on Luffy. Oh, how wrong they were. Sengoku knew it was going to be a long day the moment Garp broke down his door, saying that the Whitebeard pirates had taken out yet another marine base. Looking up from his numerous amounts of papers, Sengoku watched as his longtime friend sat in the chair across from his desk. I know. Che, Garp said, placing a hand over his face. The brats should have known better than to mess with Whitebeard. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Apparently they didn't get the message, Sengoku said flatly, rereading over the report. Though there was something pretty interesting. His old friend lifted his head, eyes sparkling with curiously. And what might that be? You know those ridiculous reports of a child being on board the Moby? Sengoku asked, shuffling through the stack of papers, trying to find the one that he was looking for. Well, apparently, those reports are true. He handed Garp a picture of the child that was fighting alongside Fire Fist Ace. It's interesting. Really? Why would Whitebeard take in a child? It's a glaring weakness. Whitebeard is known for treating everyone like sons, Garp shrugged, grinning. Maybe this kid had a bad past and Whitebeard decided to help him. Doesn't explain how he's able to fight so well, Sengoku said, eyes narrowing. At the skill level he's at right now, you'd think they'd been training him for years. Maybe they have, his friend answered. They could have been keeping him a secret from the outside world. That would be hard, Sengoku mused, rubbing his beard, but I guess not impossible. Garp laughed, slamming the picture onto the desk. Anything else? Sengoku slid the report towards the vice admiral. Says the kid has king's haki. What? Sengoku knew that this was an important detail. If they didn't get rid of this problem soon, then the boy could grow up to be a huge threat to the government. A kid having enough control over king's haki to knock out Grand Line Marines. Some lower-ranking Marines were attacking him when suddenly they all fell to the ground, unconscious. The vice admiral at the base saw it happen. He's the one who's been delivering the reports. What a nightmare. Garp laughed. They just keep coming, eh? This war has gone on for far too long, Sengoku muttered in return. Eventually all this bloodshed needs to end. War never ends, Garp reminded him, standing up from his chair and starching. Hey, Senny. What's his name? You know, the child. Sengoku frowned, looking at the papers once more. Luffy, apparently. That's what the commanders were calling him. Luffy? Garp's eyes widened as he thought of the day so many years ago. No, that wasn't right. Luffy was dead. Luffy was gone. Luffy wasn't a pirate. He snatched the picture from Sengoku's desk, ignoring his friend's slightly startled look. Is there something wrong, Garp? I'm leaving. Garp practically stormed out of the room, trying to control his ragged breathing. He slammed open the doors of the balcony on the top floor of Marineford, looking out into the vast ocean of the Grand Line. Luffy? Is it really you? He looked at the picture of the boy, smiling, bright-faced with a small scar under his left eye. Suddenly, Garp felt older than he has in such a long time. Where have you been all these years? Monkey D. Luffy. Oh, Garp was pissed. Very, very, very pissed. Part of the reason was, yes, his job, and then fact that Sengoku was being an absolute asshole. Complete and utter asshole. An enraged, practically murderous aura surrounded the old man. It had been a year. A year since he found out his grandson is somehow alive. A year since he's been able to go out of this goddamn marine base because someone didn't want him interacting with the enemy. Clutching the morning newspaper in his fists, Garp held in a snarl, not completely believing what he was reading. Luffy had a bounty. When Marco read the morning paper the next day, he didn't believe it. At first, there was just a bunch of boring things such as pirate attacks and such. Nothing really caught his eyes other than a pirate group was currently invading Fishman Island. Oyaji wasn't going to like that. He was tearing the article out to give to Oyaji when something fluttered from the last page that Marco had yet to read. His curiosity got the better of him, so he picked up what looked like the back of the wanted poster and flipped it over, curious to see if it was anyone interesting. As it turns out, it was a very interesting person indeed. The blonde's face turned into a wide grin, looking at the number under that grinning face that the Whitebeard pirates have come to adore. Luffy. Huh. It wasn't a bad first bounty. Fact, it was even more impressive that the person that the government wanted so badly was 10. Marco supposed that growing up with Whitebeard and not dying meant that you were pretty strong. Marco walked towards the gallery, fully intent on sharing the news with everyone. The sound of laughing and plates clicking reached the blonde's ears as he continued to walk down the wooden hallway below deck. Marco stopped at the door, glancing down at the paper that would no doubt be ripped up in all the excitement. Their little brother was growing up so fast. Marco snorted, pushing open one of the doors and walked in. He almost immediately spotted Ace and Luffy, who were no doubt having an eating contest like they did every morning, while Thatch was making a betting poll in the background. Grinning evilly, Marco walked over to Ace and tapped the fire user on his shoulder. Of course, all he got was a "Give me a second." Marco snorted and whopped his little brother on the head with the newspaper on his hand. Ace turned to glare at him, his mouth still full of food. The blonde simply rolled his eyes and showed Ace the bounty poster, making sure that no one else took notice of it yet. The reaction was instantaneous. Ace practically choked on his food, spitting all of it out on the nearest commander, who happened to be Curiel. Ignoring Curiel's angry protests and the annoyed groans of the people that had bet on the 2nd Division commander, Ace snatched the paper and read it over at least 4 times. Looking up, Ace's expression was unreadable. "Please, tell me this is a joke." Holding in a laugh, Marco shook his head. "No, I found it in the papers this morning. I'm pretty sure there's an article about it, but I didn't read that far." By now, the other pirates were gathering around the raven-haired male, pushing and shoving each other out of the way. "He's 10. Ace smacked the paper before reading it again. "Extremely dangerous. This is bullshit." Luffy had stopped eating, looking over Ace's shoulder curiously. He couldn't see the paper very well with the herd of pirates that all wanted to see what got the fire user so agitated. They all knew it was about Luffy, after all. Who else on the ship was 10? Marco shrugged. "Actually, he is pretty dangerous, but only to his enemies. It's pretty accurate, yoi." "The hell it is, Ace," the blonde chastised. "Don't you think you're overreacting just a bit? It was going to happen eventually. He lives with us after all." "He's 10, you've already said that." Marco rolled his eyes. "Ace." Luffy tried to climb up his back, but only slid back down. Ace turned around, some of the fire in his eyes flickering away. "What's wrong?" "The fucking Marines are what's wrong." Smoke started steaming from the fire user's shoulders. Luffy and some other pirates backed off just a bit, in fear that they might get burned. Putting bounties on 10-fucking-year-old kids. Whispers started to erupt. Some were smiling, finally getting what was making Ace so upset, while others were obviously as upset as the fire user himself. Clearly, Luffy didn't quite understand what Ace was talking about. It's not like they expected the boy to, after all. He's rather slow when it comes to anything that doesn't have to do with eating or combat. Ace simply shoved the paper in the boy's face, watching with narrowed eyes. He was still rather unhappy, as Luffy fumbled around with the paper, trying to see just what made his big brother unhappy. "Flip the page." Ace held back a snarl, knowing if Luffy heard it, the boy would think that Ace was mad at him, and everyone knew just how badly that would end. The boy blinked up at Ace, giving him a small grin as he turned the page. Luffy exclaimed, jumping out of his seat and grinning at the paper. "This is so cool, Ace. Ace, I have a bounty now." "Great." Ace's voice was full of sarcasm, not that Luffy could tell, as he turned and buried his head into his hands. The boy jumped off the table, fully intent on showing everyone his new discovery. In the background, Ace heard some laughs along with yells and a few happy noises that the fire user couldn't quite recognize. Congratulations, Luffy. You're finally a big kid now. That's our little brother, oi, oi. Start making more food, bring the drinks, this calls for a party. Marco grinned at Ace with those lazy eyes. Shouldn't we go? Why? They're going to throw a party, Marco reasoned. Are you sure you want to miss out on all of that food? No, Ace moaned into his hands. Marco grabbed his shoulder and gave a quick tug to make sure the fire user knew he was serious. Act exited. For Luffy, alright? With a sigh, Ace stood up and headed towards the door. Alright, for Luffy. Somewhere on a deserted island back in the Grand Line, a certain redhead was still recovering from his latest hangover, completely oblivious to the news. Ben Beckman, however, was quietly reading the morning newspaper, grinning when a certain paper fell out. He picked up the paper and his grin doubled. Oh, Brat finally got a bounty? I was wondering when the Marines would notice. The man stood up, walking over and kicking his captain in the side. Shanks whined in his sleep and rolled over, but did not wake. Ben rolled his eyes, kicking the man again, and again, and again. Okay, okay, Shanks yelped, rubbing sleep out of his eyes and massaging his forehead. I'm up. Damn, my head hurts. Shouldn't have drank that much, Captain, Ben said, throwing the paper towards him. Found something interesting in the newspaper that you might like. Eh? Shanks flipped through the pages, not noticing what Ben had. Why'd you give me a paper about some rookie? Flip the page, moron. Oh? Shanks picked up the wrinkled, yellow paper. A grin etching on his face every so slightly. Seems like our little anchor is getting more infamous every year. Robin smiled sadly at the paper, wondering if Luffy was happy with this. She knew that when she got her first bounty, it was not something to celebrate. But, perhaps, Luffy's case was different. The raven-haired woman shivered as a cold wind whipped around his, making her clothes flutter in the wind. Her only response was to wrap her coat even tighter around her shoulders, wishing she was somewhere warmer. Luffy, she called out softly, knowing that no one could hear her voice. No one ever could. No one but him. I wonder if you still remember our promise. Snow started falling from the sky as she trudged on, searching for her next clue. Her hair whipped all over her face as she looked up at the stars, wishing she could be one of them. Will you ever come and find me? Dead or alive 000, 000, Oyaji. Marco opened the door to his captain's sleeping quarters, cautiously peeking his head him. Whitebeard looked at him, giving the man a small, welcoming smile. We have some rather bad news. Oh, Whitebeard raised an eyebrow, and what would that be? Ah, Marco brought up the morning's newspaper, throwing it up at Whitebeard. Some big-shot supernova thought it would be a good idea to attack Fishman Island, and they're currently causing a whole lot of chaos. They're rather strong, according to the rumors, so the royal guards are having a hard time dealing with them. Should I take a small group and get rid of them? Whitebeard hummed, closing his eyes. No, he answered simply. I haven't seen my old friend in a long time. It would be good to go and visit him. Marco's eyes sparkled in the light. All right, Oyaji. I'll tell everyone else. Really? Ace slammed open the door to the rip-off bar, closely followed by Marco and Luffy, who wanted to meet the Pirate King's first mate. The said man looked up from the newspaper he was reading and grinned. Oh, if it isn't Ace. He laughed, folding the paper and putting it on the countertop. Behind him, Shaki offered a wave as she went around maintaining the bar. What brings you here? Marco grinned, throwing some money on the table. Rayleigh calmly picked it up, rolling his eyes. It wasn't like he asked for the money. They probably wanted a coating, which he would have done for free. We need a coating done. There are some problems on Fishman Island that Oyaji wants to deal with, Yoi. Rayleigh raised an eyebrow. I saw your ship. Why is he bringing everyone? I'm pretty sure the main motive was a vacation. Marco answered, the smile never leaving his face. Rayleigh chuckled. That sounds like the old man. Finally noticing Luffy, who was semi-hiding behind Marco's legs, the older man raised an eyebrow. And who's this? Last time I checked, you guys didn't have the patience for a child. He's rather cute, Shaki said, grinning as she cleaned a glass. Luffy puffed out his cheeks, stepping away from Marco's legs. I'm not cute, bastard. Language, Marco said offhandedly. Ace picked the child up, ignoring the sound of protest. "This is Luffy. We took him in a few years back. I guess you could say we've gotten used to him. The only annoying part is he's turned into Thatch's apprentice." Rayleigh hummed. "Is that so?" He chuckled and looked at Luffy's hat, his eyes lingering for a few seconds. Shaking his head, the man stood up. "I suppose I should start if you want to leave soon." "Thanks again, Rayleigh." The man gave a dry laugh. "Try not to draw attention to yourselves. It'll cause problems." They were walking towards Sabaody Park when they first spotted the celestial dragon. Ace snarled, putting a hand over Luffy's mouth and sunk into the shadows. The Whitebeard pirates would never bow to them. Luffy squeaked, but didn't make a sound as he felt Ace's murderous aura. The 10-year-old craned his neck to look at Marco, only to see the blonde just as pissed. Luffy blinked in confusion, wondering what they were so mad about. It was another few minutes before Luffy's mouth was released and he was allowed to make noise again. He sat on Ace's back, grinning as he reached out to touch one of the bubbles. "Hey, Ace. Why were you so mad earlier?" Ace looked up at the boy. "Oh, because of the celestial dragon." "Celestial dragon? Like the one that killed?" "Yeah," Ace said. "Same people who killed Sabo. They're government dogs who have way too much power and are incredibly weak, yoi." Marco explained, looking at a map. "They take away other people's freedom for their own selfish needs." "That's bad," Luffy said simply. "But why's everyone bowing to them?" "'Cause they have a lot of power," Ace answered. "If they don't bow to them, the celestial dragons will kill them." "Oh, I don't like them. None of us do, Luffy." Ace's eyes sparkled with malice. "Trust me, none of us do." Luffy cried out in joy as he ran around Ace's feet, wanting to explore everything. But honestly, no one blamed him. Sabaody Park was something incredible to behold. "Marco," the child cried, tugging on the sleeves of the blonde. "We need to go on the Ferris wheel." "The Ferris wheel?" Rolling his eyes, Marco answered, "All right, just calm down first, yoi. We've got time to kill. We can go on whatever you want." Marco was not going to say it gave him joy when the child's eyes literally turned into stars. "We haven't stayed in Fishman Island in forever. Usually we're just passing through to get to the new world. This is the first time we'll be docking," Haruta said, grinning as the ship sunk below the waves. "I'm excited to see how it's grown. There's supposed to be this really good mermaid cafe that I was to visit." Thatch laughed. "I can't wait to see all of those beautiful mermaids." "You'll just scare them off again," Flamenco said with a laugh. "Ace!" Luffy suddenly cried out, running towards the railing of the ship. "Look at that fish, it's huge." Ace looked over his shoulder, grinning at the child. "It would make good dinner, huh Luffy?" "Yeah," the child agreed enthusiastically. Thatch, you've got to catch it. We can have Sea King for dinner tonight." "Forget it, kid." Thatch laughed. "There is no way in hell I'm getting my hair wet." "Your hair doesn't matter," Luffy said, crossing his arms and puffing out his cheeks. A habit he does whenever he's mad or upset about something. "You can fix it later. If you want it so much, you can get it." "I can't swim," Luffy cried out. Thatch shrugged. "Then too bad. Guess you'll have to wait for dinner, yeah?" "Jerk," Luffy said, completely forgetting the whole incident as soon as he saw another Sea King swim by. "Luffy," Ace said sternly, making the 10-year-old look him in the eye. "You will not get lost, you hear me? You will stay by my side and not draw attention to yourself." "Fine," Luffy muttered, hating being called out for getting lost. It wasn't his fault that Ace always seemed to wander off, or rather, he was the one that wandered off. But that wasn't the point. Ace was treating him like a baby and he didn't like it. He wasn't a 4-year-old anymore. He was 10, old enough to become a man. He even had a bounty. "Luffy, I'm serious," Ace said, picking the boy up. "This place is dangerous, especially with those pirates running around. I also heard a rumor about the Marines being on the island." So, Ace repeated sarcastically. "You got a bounty, you rubber idiot. Some people might be after you." "I'll take them all on," Luffy grinned, eyes sparkling. Ace whacked him over the head. "You can't, moron. That's what I'm trying to tell you." "Ace," Luffy whined, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "That hurt." "Deal with it," Ace snapped, cuffing the other over the head once again. "Luffy, we don't want you to get lost, okay? It's not that hard. Okay. The boy cried out. I get it, please stop hitting me, I promise I won't get lost. I'm lost. The 10-year-old boy blinked up at a rather beautiful mermaid, who had found him hopelessly wandering the streets. The mermaid giggled. Maybe I can help you find your way back? Really? Luffy said, his eyes sparkling. Thanks so much, Miss Mermaid. Call me Kami, Kami said with a small smile. It had been a while since she'd seen a human child. They really were as cute as she remembered. Now, where are you from? I'm from the Moby, a really, really big boat. He threw his arms out to make his point. It's got this really cool whale in the front. Kami's eyes widened. She'd heard stories of this country's heroes, the Whitebeard pirates. It was said that they rode on a beautiful ship with a white whale figurehead. The Moby? Kami questioned, not really believing what she was hearing. You're from the Moby? Yep. Luffy chirped out just as another voice reached her ears. Kami. Turning around on her bubble, the mermaid grinned and threw open her arms, embracing the ormpet on her paw-pug. A talking blob. The child cried out, that's so cool. I'm a starfish, the said orange blob corrected. A talking starfish. Luffy's eyes turned into stars. That's still so cool. It was when Luffy got lost for the second time that trouble finally caught up to him. In hindsight, he really should have noticed when the old, kind of terrifying, man started to follow him, but the boy chose to ignore it so he could focus on finding the ship. He'd lost sight of Kami almost 10 minutes ago when she started screaming that she did something wrong with this really weird face. Paw-Pug didn't help the situation at all and started yelling as well, so Luffy left. He was starting to regret that decision by now. The boy could ignore all the weird looks that the fishmen gave him. He got weird looks even when he was above ground. But the old man was starting to freak him out, having just noticed the look on that said man's face. It was scary, so he ran. Worst mistake of his life. The man looked surprised for a second, a flash of hurt appeared on his face, but that was quickly replaced as anger. The man lunged at him, missing him by mere centimeters. Luffy yelped, running even faster. Was this one of those men that Ace was talking about? The one that was after his bounty? It was then that he noticed the marine uniform. Leave me alone, Luffy cried out, running as fast as his legs could take him. The man started screaming random gibberish that Luffy didn't even try to understand. Stop chasing me. That is how Luffy's afternoon went, screaming as he ran around town with a scary old man chasing him. The boy was surprised that he hadn't run into any of his brothers or sisters yet, and he was silently wishing that he would sometime soon. Marco was having a rather enjoyable time shopping with Thatch, for once. He'd gotten much-needed new clothes while Thatch went and bought some of the Fishman Island specialties down at the food market. All in all, they were having a lot of fun. Well, until they saw the red blob streak past them, screaming out things like, "Leave me alone," and "Stop," closely followed by marine hero, Garp the Fist. Hey, Thatch said with a little uncertainly, wasn't that Luffy? You know what? Marco said hesitantly. I'm pretty sure that was. Both of the men looked at each other before breaking out into a sprint, trying to catch up with their little brother who had somehow gotten into another sticky situation, again. Gasping for air, Luffy desperately clung to Marco's arm as they faced the creepy old man that had been chasing Luffy for at least an hour. Silently, the boy thanked that awful training that Izo always put him through. That was probably the only reason that he hadn't passed out by now. That geezer was fast. Now, what do we have here? Marco said, his lazy eyes narrowing slightly. First thought a marine hero knew better than to pick on kids. Shut your mouth, Phoenix. You know what he's capable of. The brat is dangerous. Garp snapped, as he massaged his temples. But that's not the reason I'm here. Oh, Thatch said in the same emotionless voice as Marco. Then what's a big shot doing here then? Going after Oyaji's head? No, Garp snarled, removing his hand from his face and glaring at both commanders. It was quite a surprise. After all, Garp wasn't really a man that was known to be serious. Most of the time he'd go and hit Ace, something that Thatch loved to tease the fire user about, and then just linger around the deck. Of course, the man hadn't ever seen Luffy. They either kept the boy below deck, or as far away as they could. They didn't want anyone knowing about the boy if they could help it. Well, that was only a bittersweet memory at this point. I thought that I'd come and take my grandson back, the man finished, looking straight into Marco's eyes with a fierce determination. You will not be stopping me, Phoenix. Ace, Thatch snorted. Look, we all know that you're crazy, but there is no way in hell that he'd ever go back. He's not talking about Ace, Thatch. Marco said seriously, his grip unconsciously hugging the 10-year-old closer in his arms. What? Monkey D. Luffy. Grap said, now if you please, give me back my grandson. Marco could feel Luffy shift in his arms, clearly confused about the whole situation. For now, the blonde ignored the child, focusing on the older man. No. Garp's face twisted, his eyes holding malice to anyone who got in the way. You have no right to keep him here, he's my grandson. And he's our brother, too, Marco snapped, blue flames flickering to life. You might be related by blood, but that doesn't mean anything when you abandon a child on a fucking island. Oh, for the love of, Garp swore, his fist clenching. I didn't leave him anywhere. If I knew he was alive, then he wouldn't be in this damn situation. He wouldn't have a bounty and he wouldn't be having to deal with you. Luffy whimpered, not liking all the yelling. Marco brushed a hand through the boy's hair as he quietly passed Luffy over to Thatch. Then what happened? Let me talk to your captain. I'm not letting you get near Oyaji until you calm down and tell us first, Marco said, crossing his arms. Garp snarled, but both commanders could tell that he was losing the burning anger. The older man closed his eyes as if he was remembering a painful memory. There was a storm, he started. I was getting Luffy away from that damn son of mine, to grow up somewhere peacefully and become a Marine when he was older. You were taking him away from his dad? Thatch raised an eyebrow. Why would you do that? Who's his dad anyway? Monkey D. Dragon. Marco said before Garp could snap again, right? Yes, Garp said, ignoring the surprised look of the 4th Division commander. Anyways, we were in the middle of the sea when the storm hit. Our ship was capsized. Luffy had already eaten a devil fruit by then. Accident, of course. We all thought he drowned. The man shook his head. I still have no clue how he survived. So you just left? Thatch inquired, some anger rising. You just abandoned him because you thought he drowned? Why didn't you check the surrounding islands? Because then nearest one was at least a mile away, Grap snarled. Ever if he managed to wash up on shore, being in the water that long would have killed him by itself. The water would have weakened him so much that his body would have stopped working, there was no way he'd be alive. But he is, Marco said, eyes flashing, and now he's part of our family, not yours. You don't have any right to keep him here, Garp growled. I want to talk to your captain. Marco just shrugged. Talk to him all you want. Every person will just say the same thing. Luffy is our family now. Marco played with his glass at the local fishman bar, lost in thought. Ace was to his left, supporting several bruises from his grandfather's fist of love, while Luffy was sitting in the man's lap, happily eating some meat. Today had been a long day for all of them. Garp had left almost an hour ago after a full-blown yelling match took place the rest of the afternoon. Whitebeard had to physically remove him from the ship so it wouldn't turn out into an all-out war. As soon as Luffy had gotten back to the ship, the 10-year-old boy had immediately rushed below deck and hidden himself, trying to block out on the yelling. Everyone on the ship could tell the boy was upset with the whole situation, so they didn't bother him. When Luffy had finally come out, Marco and Ace had brought him to a local bar so he could eat without everyone looking at him strangely. They'd learned his parentage, and no matter how hard the crewmates tried, they could help but think that the kid had one wild bloodline. Even if he had a monster for a dad and an asshole for a grandfather, he was still Luffy. He was still their little brother, he was still their family. Monkey D. Luffy, huh? Marco didn't really know how to react to that. One D was enough for the whole ship, but another one? It was Avery one. Though, Marco had to say that he wasn't as surprised as he should have been. It explained a lot about Luffy and his sheer determination. Luffy, that's mine, Ace snapped, snatching a piece of meat from the 10-year-old's hands. Luffy whined and pouted at him, but Ace glared at the boy. You have your own, stop stealing mine. It certainly explained his long-questioned appetite. What does D stand for anyways? Jozu asked, leaning against his seat. The seats used for commanders' meetings were always uncomfortable, and this time it wasn't any different. All 16 of them, plus Whitebeard, of course, crowded around a small table to discuss the happenings of the ship. Said Ace, who had been leaning against the wall when Jozu spoke. The other commanders all snorted. Even Namur cracked a grin. Whitebeard leaned back in his chair as he watched his commanders interact. It brought a smile to his face, being able to live out his dream every day. His family was strong. They all carried their own dreams, their own will. It reminded him of that time. The words Roger spoke to him, the will of D, huh? He realized that it had gone silent. All his commanders were staring at him with looks of confusion, except for Marco, that is. Marco had been with him when Roger spun his tail. Oyaji? Blenheim questioned. You know about this D stuff? I do, Whitebeard rumbled and laughed. It's a long story, Yoi. Marco sighed and shook his head, ignoring the surprised looks thrown his way. You want to know, my sons? Whitebeard said, eyes narrowed. A resounding yes was heard from the group. Whitebeard laughed. All right, I'll tell you. It has been passed down by ancient times, and in the future, someday, someone will appear and carry the history of all those centuries on his back, and challenge this whole world to a fight. The commanders looked confused. Fosa lit a cigar, tilting his head in interest. What do you mean, Oyaji? It all started 800 years ago, when a certain organization called the World Government came to be. Luffy. Ace smacked the 11-year-old's feet, trying to wake the boy up. Luffy, of course, just rolled over and muttered gibberish about meat and other types of food that made Ace's stomach growl. Come on, Brad. Up, get up. It's too early, Luffy muttered, burying his face into a pillow. His body let out an involuntary shiver as he pulled the blanket tighter around his body. Cold. We go over this every time it gets cold, Luffy. Ace placed his hands on his hips with a sigh. Honestly, if you can get up, you'll get your warm clothes on, yeah? I'm pretty sure that Thatch is making something in the kitchen to warm everyone up. You'll miss breakfast if you just stay in here. Luffy poked his head out from the pillow. What kind of breakfast? Warm breakfast. Ace answered with a grin. Then you can go play out in the snow. Oyaji's going up against the whole crew in a snowball war. He might be the strongest man in the world, but he's not a very good snowball fighter. It snowed? Luffy sat up and stretched his arms over his head. He quickly realized it was colder than he first thought and pulled the blanket over his shoulders, walking to his closet and pulling out the warmest things he could find. Huh? Ace blinked. Oh, yeah. It snowed last night. Thatch is having a heyday. It was a well-known fact that Luffy and Thatch were complete opposites when it came to snow. Though, both of them loved to play in it. Luffy preferred nice, warm days compared to the freezing temperatures. Ace thought it was because rubber became brittle when it was cold, so Luffy was much more susceptible to attacks. Thatch, on the other hand, loved snow. No one really knew why, but whenever it would snow, Thatch would practically skip across the deck the whole day, taking part in every snow-related activity out there. Ace was indifferent about the whole matter since the snow didn't bother him at all. Good for him, Luffy said, putting on his jacket. When are we going to go back to the Summer Islands? A few weeks, Ace shrugged. I don't know. I'm not a navigator. Though, everyone is saying that we should land on the next island in about 2 or 3 more hours. You coming to town? Yep, the boy chirped. Thatch said that this was one of his favorite islands. 'Cause it has the best snow, Ace snorted. But it's true. The snow there is like fluffy powder. It's fun to jump in. Last time we visited, Thatch brought a few crates on land and made a platform where we could jump in the snow. It was fun. Luffy hummed an acknowledgement, his stomach suddenly let loose a large rumble. I'm hungry. Ace laughed. Then let's go, yeah? We don't want Blamenco eating all the food. Luffy rolled his eyes and grinned. He eats too much. I don't want to hear that coming from you. So, Thatch clapped his hands together, drawing everyone's attention to himself. Who's going to the island with me? I have this really fun plan. Ace calmly put his fork down and snorted. I was going to go, but now you're making me hesitate. That's rude, Thatch shot his friend a playful glare. But seriously, who's coming? I don't want to go alone. It's no fun. I'll go, Haruta said with a grin, glancing to the left, where Vista was ignoring everyone in order to focus on his meal. Vista's coming with, though. The swordsman raised his head when he heard his name being called, a look of understanding coming across his face when his brain finally registered what was being said. Oi! Vista tried to protest, but was cut off by a smug grin from Haruta and the puppy dog eyes of doom from Thatch. Eventually, he relented with a sigh. "Fine, I'll come." Of course. Thatch's grin seemed to match Haruta's. Eventually, he turned his attention to the 11-year-old boy who was inhaling food at a seemingly impossible rate. "What about you, Luffy? Coming?" "Yep," he managed to choke out as he continued eating. "Ace is coming too." "I said maybe." Ace argued. "And I said you're coming." Thatch laughed, slapping the fire user on the back. "That's everyone, right?" "What about Marco?" Luffy asked, letting out a small yawn when he stopped eating for the moment. "Marco might want to come." "Marco might want to babysit," Thatch corrected. "He's a stick in the mud when it comes to fun. Phoenixes just don't seem to understand the joy of snow." "Don't make up lies, Yoi," Marco said, startling everyone at the table. He approached the group, his own food in hand. "It's true though," Thatch muttered, yelping when the blonde stuffed his face into his breakfast. He let out a sound of protest, lifting his face back up and whipped all of the grease off. "Marco." "I'll be going as well," Marco informed them with a small, smug smile. "The bigger the group, the better, Yoi." "Fine," Thatch said as he stood up, dusting his pants off. "We'll just have to teach you how to have fun, Pineapple." Luffy giggled as he ran around in the snow, the Ace, Marco and Thatch watching from the side as Haruta and Vista had a miniature snowball fight with the boy. It felt good to just let loose like this every once in a while. They had traveled right outside the town, away from any civilians who might recognize them. The commanders had decided just to enjoy the snow a bit before they went shopping in the town. Thatch and Ace had played with the boy in the beginning, but then opted for a quiet spot to watch. Marco hadn't even taken part in the activities, only watching his brothers from the sidelines. "Thatch," Ace said suddenly, watching as Thatch kept looking at the sky with this blissful smile. Several snowflakes landed on his face, but he didn't seem to take notice. "What are you thinking about?" Thatch hummed, closing his eyes and flopping back into the soft, pillow-like snow. The smile never left his face as he answered, "When I die, I hope it's snowing." Ace snorted, a softer version of his trademark grin taking its place on his face. "Why snow?" "It's soft?" Thatch guessed with a laugh, opening his eyes but they didn't leave the sky. "I dunno. I've just always liked snow. It's calming, you know? I grew up on a winter island, you know? When I was alone, it was the one thing that made me happy. It's comforting to think about. It brings back good memories. I guess if I'm ever going to die, I'd be with someone I loved," Ace said with a shrug. "But I don't plan on dying soon, so." Thatch let out a breathy laugh. "It's the grand line, Ace." "Yeah, I know. I'm not worried about dying, it's just leaving behind the people you love most," Marco said with a nod. "We all feel the same way. Just don't go dying on us soon, Yoi." "You too, Thatch. We need our commanders." "Of course, how could I leave my little brothers all alone?" "I'm older, Yoi." "Hey," Luffy said, blinking as small snowflakes fluttered on his eyelashes. "Is the town supposed to be this empty?" All the commanders frowned at the sentence, watching as a door swung open in the brisk winter wind and shut again. It was rather creepy, but they decided to ignore it for now. There was almost no one out, and the people that they did see always flinched when they passed, glancing at them and then shutting their windows. "No," Thatch muttered, mostly to himself but everyone heard it. "Last time we were here, everyone was out and playing in the snow. Everything was decorated in lights and it was always in a festive mood. It's like something really bad happened." "Probably did," Ace answered curtly, his eyes scanning the houses as they walked down the snowy road. "It's like a plague swept through the town. But that wouldn't explain why the locals seem to be afraid of us. Last time, they threw a party to welcome us." "Pirate attack?" Vista ventured, pulling the scarf over his face so he wouldn't get windburn. Haruta eyed the houses suspiciously, her blue eyes narrowing when a mother spotted them, yelped and ushered her child inside, slamming the door behind her. "I doubt it. There's no damage to the houses or anything. It's like this town is haunted or something." Thatch let, crossing his arms over his chest and pouting. "Well, there goes our vacation. How about we hit the next island? I heard that it was a winter one also." Luffy was about to agree when something caught his attention from the corner of his eye. The boy turned around, his eyes widening to what he saw. He turned back towards the commanders, taking Ace's hand and yanking the limb, trying to desperately get his attention. "Luffy!" Ace yelped, stumbling when the child pulled harder than he meant to. "What are you?" He trailed off when he saw what the child was pointing at. Flames flared to life on his shoulders for a second before they flickered out. "Fuck," he whispered before he raised his voice a little to notify the others. "Thatch, I think I know why there are many people out." "Wah," Thatch said, looking at the spot where Ace was pointing. A scream told him otherwise. The first thing he noticed was the child, no older than Luffy, struggling in a net with a few guys laughing above him. The boy was beaten up, obviously putting up a fight. He was screaming at the men, though the commanders couldn't understand his words. And everyone's blood ran as cold as the ice on the windows, 2 words somehow making it out of someone's mouth: slave traders. They found the auction house not too far away from the ship, standing out in all of its horrible glory. It was lit up like a Christmas house, full of lights and colors. A few people were laughing just outside of it, drinking sake and acting like they were having the best time of their lives. It made Ace sick. After they had freed the boy and killed the slave traders, they verified it, of course. They wouldn't want to go around killing random civilians. Luffy had become clingier than usual. He had clung to Ace like a lifeline and eventually stopped walking entirely, so Ace had to pick the boy up and put him on his shoulders. Thankfully he was still small, but man, he was starting to get too heavy to carry anymore. Luffy hadn't been too happy about going to the auction house either, as Ace quickly found out. Whenever they took a step closer to the giant building, Luffy's grip on Ace's hair tightened until Ace had to slap the boy's hands and tell him to loosen up. As they reached the door, the drunkards grinned at them. Their yellow teeth made Ace want to cringe. Apparently, the drunkards thought that the group was a part of the slave trading businesses and welcomed them with open arms. They hated all of it. But the Whitebeard pirates had decided to go with it for now, hopeful that they would be able to get some information out of the men. Of course, they didn't plan to stay long as they really couldn't stand these types of people. So, one of them said suddenly, throwing a sake cup into the snow, "What are you selling, the child?" Ace had to close his eyes and count to 10 in order to keep control over the fire that raged within him. Normally, he was good with his control level, but on occasions, much like this one, his control would explode and it was not pretty. "No," Vista said in a low snarl, "he is not for sale." The men laughed, apparently taking it as a joke. "If ye change your mind, let us know, Kay? We'd find you the right price." "No," Marco said, voice cold and very much unlike the bored tone that he usually used. "Luffy's not going anywhere." "Che. Just a suggestion." The man wheezed, leaning over on the side of the auction house. "If y'all want to buy in the auction, ye better get inside. They're gonna open soon." "Sure." Marco got out, his voice low in an attempt to calm himself down. When Ace didn't move, Marco grabbed his shoulder and pulled both him and Luffy into the auction house, his frown fading a little as Ace flipped off the men at the entrance. "They're all morons, ignore them," Marco said as they took the seats in the back row, away from any prying eyes. Haruta had her arms crossed over her chest, glaring at the couple in front of them who were discussing the best type of slave to buy. Vista was in the same position, while Ace had set Luffy on his lap, pulling the boy into a hug. "I don't like this," Luffy said quietly. It probably would have been a good idea to drop the boy back at the ship before they came and then confronted the issue, but it was too late to go back now. For the time being, Luffy just had to deal with it and try not to give them away too early. Ace had taken it upon himself to comfort the boy as soon as the auctioneer came and blasted random gibberish into the speaker. As soon as he heard noise, Luffy buried his head into Ace's chest. "Shush." Ace had whispered low enough for no one else to hear. "Luffy, you're okay. No one is going to hurt you, all right? We'll protect you, we always have." Ace knew of Luffy's fear of slavery. He didn't know how it devolved, but he supposed it had to do with the celestial dragons. It was probably one of those times where one of the slaves had escaped in Sabaody and the bastards had to deal with them. Luffy's fear wasn't exactly over the slavery itself, more of the loss of freedom. Freedom had always been a thing that Luffy needed, as the crew found out rather quickly. If Luffy didn't have the freedom that he needed, he would often get really agitated, twitchy, or possibly start to freak out and cause messes. "Luffy," Ace said, trying to get the boy's attention. Just breathe, alright? Calm down. Ace then proceeded to keep soothing the boy by telling him stories of his earliest adventures. He told the boy about Sabo a lot, even if he really didn't want to talk about it. Sabo was someone that Luffy looked up to, even if the boy had never met him. Every story that Ace told about his old friend always had Sabo as the main protagonist. Ace would sometimes put himself in the stories, depending on if he was planning a true story or not, but Luffy always liked to hear about Sabo the most. Sometimes Ace wished that Luffy had met him. Sabo would have really liked the brat. Before either of them knew it, the auction was over and Marco was nudging him, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce determination. Time to go, Yoi. We've got an auction to crash. About an hour later, all 6 of them came back covered in scratches and bruises but looking overly happy with themselves. The crew came to welcome them back up on deck, laughing and demanding to know what happened. We ran into some slave traders, Vista explained with an eye roll. Then we blew up the auction house and freed all the savs. The townspeople were pretty happy about that. Cheers came from the crew, some even bringing out some sake and food. Whenever they did something like this, the Whitebeard pirates had devolved a tradition of throwing a party to celebrate the freedom of the slaves. Hell, some of the former slaves even joined the party from time to time and eventually joined Whitebeard. Luffy was bouncing around the deck, talking to everyone and enjoying himself like he always did. It was like the Action House incident didn't even register in his mind anymore. Most of the crew wasn't surprised by his behavior, as if happened often, but several new crew members were quite miffed to see a child on deck, acting like he had been with this family for years. The commanders just sat back and laughed. Some hell of a birthday, huh, Haruta? Thatch whispered to the swordswoman, grinning when she flushed and shot him an angry look. Shut up. That's supposed to be a secret. Thatch just clicked his tongue together. Tisk. You should know better than to try and hide secrets from the wondrous Thatch. I know everything that happens on this ship. You mean Luffy knows everything and tells you, right? Haruta said with a grin. She laughed when Thatch's smile dropped and his expression was changed into mock horror. You wound me, Haruta, he said, making sure that his facade wouldn't break. You wound me very much. The woman laughed. Just saying that your big mouth is going to get you killed, Thatchy. Commander Haruta is right, Commander Thatch, a deep voice said, startling both commanders. They SD-faced Teach, a man that they had both come to respect over the years. That mouth could get ya killed sooner rather than later. Jesus, Teach, don't sneak up on us like that, oi, Thatch laughed, taking his words jokingly. Stop killing me off. I'm not going to die so easily. Oh, I know Commander Thatch. Teach said with a wicked grin. Oh, trust me, I know. Attack. The cry rang across the ship, startling several crew members below the deck. Luffy, who was about to start drawing on Ace's face while the fire user was sleeping, was thrown off the body as Ace jerked awake, his eyes wide and slightly dangerous. 2 other crew members came racing below deck yelling, Marines! Marines are here, at the top of their lungs, running throughout the corridors. Izo peeked his head out from his quarter with a nasty frown on his half-makeup covered face. Now? I haven't finished putting my makeup on. Luffy just laughed, jumping up to his feet and clinging to Ace's leg as the fire user sent the boy a disapproving glare. I don't think they'll notice over all the marine blood that'll be splattered on your face. Izo turned his sharp glare to the boy. Luffy, that is the most demented thing that I've ever heard you say. Luffy beamed up at the man innocently. Alright, Ace said, shaking his leg slightly, hitting Luffy with his knee. Off my leg, brat. You fighting this time? Luffy uncurled his arms from the fire user's leg, dusting himself off and offering a determined grin. Yup. I haven't been sparing much, so I need to train somehow. Ace rolled his eyes, ruffling the boy's hair as he walked to the entrance, barely flinching when a loud bang echoed throughout the ship, causing it to jerk violently to the side. You know, most kids your age wouldn't even be thinking about fighting. What about school and homework? Maybe we should get you lessons or something. Like hell, Luffy said, crossing his arms over his chest and pouting as he raced behind his older brother. School and stuff is really boring. I ain't doing something like that. Oh, you poor baby, Ace teased, slamming open the hatch of the door, letting all the sounds of the battle filter through the halls. Ace barely blinked as he dodged a spear that lodged itself into the wooden door frame, only inches from his head. He glanced at the boy that he'd watched grow up since 4, now the tender age of 12, ready for yet another routine battle. Part of the fire user felt bad about picking the child up on that island. After all, he was forced into the line of piracy. It wasn't by choice. Though, given who his father was, the marine life wouldn't have been a great option either. He'd most likely died years ago, thanks to Garp's big mouth and terrible parenting skills. It was amazing how much the boy had grown though. Learning hockey at such a young age, his king's hockey was incredible. Having a bounty of 100 million, it went up after yet another marine base incident. And just dealing with life. Ace honestly could wait to see how much more the boy would grow, though there would always be that nagging voice in the back of his head that practically screamed, what if? What if they'd never found him? What if Garp had made him a marine? What if he was the captain of his own pirate crew, sailing the Grand Line in search of the world-renowned treasure, One Piece? Ace didn't want to think about it. But still, he thought as he watched Luffy join the fray, fists flying in all directions. Those were only that. What ifs? He was here now, a white-beard pirate, and they could all say that he wasn't leaving anytime soon. Oh, a rather large marine sneered down at Luffy, obviously underestimating the boy with just a glance. What do we have here? A brat on a battlefield. How unexpected. Better take care of you before my superiors have to dirty their hands with a pirate brat. I'll kick your ass first, Luffy growled at him, raising his fists in an aggressive gesture. He hated Marines, or people in general, like this, completely ignoring him because he was young. He was a pirate, damn it. He should be recognized and certainty not underestimated because of his age. Che, the Marine swung his large sword at him, making a sound of surprise when Luffy dodged it with practiced ease. He tried once again, only for Luffy to catch the flat end of the sword with his hands, snapping the weapon in two. The Marine gaped at him, only to be thrown in the water with a well-aimed pistol to the face. Luffy then took the time to weave between the enemy, scoping out for anyone more powerful or possibly deadly to the crew. So far, it was just a few battleships that thought that they could take on his family. Suddenly, something hit his back, throwing him across the deck as he let out a strangled cry. The boy hit the railing with a dull thud, gasping for air and trying to figure out what exactly just happened and why he didn't sense it before. Hockey was obviously involved, judging by the pain that was flaring in his lower back. He closed his eyes, trying to catch his breath when he felt himself going weightless again, being picked up by the back of his shirt. He cracked open his eyes, flinching when a cannon went off right next to him, causing ringing to echo throughout his ears painfully. When the ringing stopped, he could focus on his attacker. Big, even larger than the last man that he fought just a few minutes ago, with yellow teeth and red eyes that seemed to glow in the night, and he had on this wicked smile. Like he was imagining everyone to torture Luffy until he cracked. Too bad the boy wouldn't crack easily. The Marine said, his breath wafting over Luffy as the boy tried not to make gagging noises. What's a little brat like you doing on a ship like this? Wonder if Whitebeard kidnapped ya, huh? HMF. Pirates really are s. Let me go, Luffy growled, kicking the man's face with a hockey-infused foot. The Marine howled, dropping the boy immediately and gripping his now broken nose. Luffy simply tensed up, trying to desperately ignore the pain in his back, instead switching in a defense position. I wasn't kidnapped and Oyaji isn't s. The Marine bared his teeth at the boy, much like a wild dog would. I was trying to save your sorry ass, boy. If y'all were kidnapped, y'all wouldn't have to face the justice of the Navy. After all, we could use some strong fighters like you. Never, Luffy hissed, raising his fist as it covered itself in the shiny black armor. I'm not going to be a Marine. Marines are the assholes, not pirates, idiot. Brainwashed. The Marine snorted, coating his own fist in hockey. Too late to save a mind like that one. Corrupted, that's what you are. Luffy let out a dry scoff, charging at the Marine. They exchanged a few blows, neither really doing any damage to the other until Luffy got a nice shot right in the stomach. Not a second later, the Marine twisted his body and managed to land a nasty hit right on Luffy's shoulder. Luffy winced, knowing full well that that would be a rather large bruise later, but for right now he focused on his fight, watching warily as the huge Marine pushed himself out of the rubble. This was a big fight. It was taking longer than most fights were, and these guys were pretty tough. Briefly, Luffy wondered how pissed the shipwrights would be when they saw the after effects, but quickly pushed the thought out of his mind when the marine lunged at him yet again, only to be intercepted by sword in the neck, causing the man to fall to the ground, obviously dead. Thatch stood over the body, rolling his eyes as it fell. Luffy smiled at him, clutching his shoulder that seemed to burn more than his back at the moment. Thatch seemed to notice his pain as well and slowly walked over. "Hey, Lou. You okay?" "Fine," Luffy replied, trying to catch his breath once again. "Just my shoulder. I'm good." Thatch gave him a disbelieving grunt. "Yeah, sure. We're almost done. Most Marines are fleeing." He noticed Luffy wince as he rubbed his injured shoulder. "You sure you're okay?" "Hungry," Luffy groaned, though he was smiling. Like Thatch said, most of the Marines were fleeing back to their ships and the sound of cannons was slowly fading away as the last men left. Bodies lingered around the deck, along with blood. He saw a few of his brothers among the body count and his gut twist painfully. Those were his family. "Why are you doing this?" Luffy wanted to scray, he didn't. Only watching as their ship sailed away, leaving their dead comrades behind. Why are you risking people's lives for sure a pointless cause? How many families had lost someone because of this stupid war? How many more have to die before you're satisfied? "Kingdu!" Luffy cried out, laughing as he chased around a beetle that he'd found on the latest island. "Kingdu, help me catch that bug. It's Hercules." "Do it yourself, Lou," came the amused reply as Kingdu trailed a bit behind the boy who seemed to be everywhere at once. Honestly, Kingdu didn't know how the boy got his energy. How did he always seem to be this big ball of sunshine that everyone adored? It was amazing how one child changed a whole crew. Kingdu wasn't a child-friendly person by any means, but Luffy was different. He was one of the few there when they picked him up 7 years ago and watched him grow into a fine pirate. It was satisfying, knowing he had a hand in raising the boy. "Stingy," Luffy said. "I'm gonna catch it by myself." "Don't get eaten. It's just a bug," his little brother whined, jumping around the air as the bug flew just out of his reach. "It's not going to eat me." Kingdu just raised an eyebrow. "I'm pretty sure that's what you said with the crocodile." "But that's a crocodile," Luffy stressed out, grinning at his older brother and much larger brother. "Besides, I was just a little kid back then." "That was 2 weeks ago, Luffy." "See?" The boy grinned his typical grin. "I was just a kid." "Just don't get eaten," Kingdu repeated. "Hungry," Luffy moaned, flopping out in the sand of the latest island and looking up at Thatch with big, wide eyes. "Thatch, feed me." The man just rolled his eyes with a small grin, picking at his fingernails carelessly. "Get some fish, you're near an ocean." Luffy pouted, sticking his bottom lip out. "Please, I don't know how to cook." So, Thatch seemed unaffected by the dubbed puppy dog eyes of doom. Get Ace to help. Ace is an asshole. Thatch just laughed with this exasperated smile on his lips. "Fine, I'll get you something. Just try not to eat anything on the beach. Yeah? No matter how good it looks, it's not going to taste great. Or be that healthy for you." Thatch watched as Luffy stuffed something in his mouth before promptly spitting it back out. Blah. Thatch simply sighed. "You know what? Never mind. Poke. Luffy. Poke. Luffy, stop. Poke. Monkey D. Luffy." Luffy let out a burst of laughter that he had been desperately trying to hold in. Jozu rubbed his cheek and muttering things about immature little kids and how much they annoy him at times. Luffy placed his head on his lap, offering a cheeky grin as a tick mark formed over his left eyebrow. "What you doing, Jozu?" "Thinking about adult stuff," he said. "That is, until you came along. Honestly, don't you have anyone else to bother?" Luffy hummed for a second, biting the inside of his cheek before he burst out in a wide grin. "Nope, they're all doing stuff so I'd bother them." "ANND?" Jozu raised an eyebrow, unable to understand what he was hearing. "What about me? Don't you think you're bothering me a bit?" "No," he puffed out his cute little cheeks. "'Cause you're not doing anything. Come here, you brat." Even if Jozu tried to deny it, it was true. He'd already finished all his paperwork. "You're lucky that you're my little brother. Come on, Ace," the now 13-year-old boy said, grabbing Ace's hand and heading for the railing before the ship had even docked. The fire user, still half asleep after being roughly shaken awake only moments before, mumbled something about islands and food, swaying for a second before falling face first onto the deck, snoring loudly. Luffy turned around, his black hair flying in his face, and he rolled his eyes and grinned. Silly Ace. He let out a small laugh, ignoring the shaking of the ship as it anchored on the beach of the island that they had landed at just a few minutes ago. Ace had promised the boy that they'd go exploring as soon they landed, but Luffy was being rather impatient and Ace had to have a narcoleptic attack and made Luffy wait for a few minutes, much to the boy's annoyance. Tired of waiting, Luffy decided to do something productive instead. He ran back down to his room and pushed open the door, ignoring the creaking sound it made as Luffy switched on the lights. He grinned mischievously, sneaking over to his desk drawer and pulling out a marker. A permanent marker, to be exact. It didn't take him long to stumble back onto deck, stalking towards Ace that was still blissfully unaware of the small, annoying predator that was about to do something that he'd later regret. Straddling his chest, the 13-year-old leaned forward, uncapping the marker and started his small doodles. At first, he played Connect the Freckles but soon ran out of freckles to connect, so he started to draw his straw hat and swirly patterns on his cheeks. Luffy thickened his eyebrows and decided that it'd be a great idea to give the man a beard. There, he announced proudly, not aware of the snickers from the other crew members behind him. He giggled as Ace groaned underneath him, climbing off the man and dashing to hide behind Fosa, who was watching the whole scene with an amused smile, as were many other commanders. Luffy grabbed his leg and looked up at the man with innocent eyes, laughing when Fosa said, "Hiding behind me is not going to do much." "I know," Luffy replied with his usual smile, "but it's better than being on top of him." "He's going to kill you," Fosa said calmly, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "Disembowel you limb for limb." Luffy just laughed and watched as Ace sat up, muttering incoherent words and yawned. Several crew members laughed at his obliviousness, successfully gaining Ace's attention. "What did they do? Where's Luffy?" "Nice mustache, Ace. You really look like Oyaji," a crew member yelled. Even Oyaji chuckled at that one as Ace groaned in frustration. "Luffy, get your ass over here now." He didn't even have to look in a mirror to know what happened. After all, Luffy did this at least once a week, always ending in Luffy getting beaten. "Make me," came the reply as Luffy darted out from behind Fosa and streaked across the deck as a pink and red blur. Ace snarled, getting to his feet and darting after the boy. "Curiel, let me go." Luffy's voice was muffled by the hand in his face as another gripped his shirt so he wouldn't dart off and get lost in the town that they had just landed in. Ace spent the whole morning trying to get the marker off of his face and locked Luffy in his room so the boy wouldn't be able to explore yet. Curiel had taken pity on him and let him out to go explore. "I need a leash for you," Curiel muttered with an eye roll. Jiru simply chuckled in agreement while Luffy made a frustrated noise at being made fun of. "I'm 13, I can take care of myself," Luffy huffed. Curiel patted the boy's head. "You'll get lost." "Will not," Luffy protested. Jiru gave a short, barking laugh and playfully flicked the teen's forehead. "Sorry buddy, you've got an awful directional sense." "Shut up." The 13-year-old stopped struggling, now pouting. He gave a weak tug, but then stilled completely, dragging his feet behind him. Stingy. Luffy was not lost, he was simply exploring without the commanders watching him. That was not being lost. Though, to be fair, Luffy had gotten bored of all the people conversing with Curiel and later Ace and Thatch who had joined them. For some reason, he was labeled as their child, no matter how much the two denied it, and decided that it would be more fun to explore on his own. From what Luffy had seen, it was just another boring town with no entertainment or marines to fight. So far, Luffy hadn't even seen a marine base, which could be good and bad. Luffy would bet that his Nakama would rather hang around an island with no marine base, but that made the adventure less fun. He kicked a rock in front of him, an annoyed whine escaping his mouth. Why wasn't there anything to do? His hair flopped in front of his eyes, obscuring his vision as he slowly walked down the dirt road. He closed his eyes for a second, letting his haki reach to the corners of this island and enjoying the tranquil feeling. There was a forest to his left. He could practically feed all the soft pitter-patter of the animals' paws as they went along their daily routine. The forest sounded like it was singing, teeming with life. It made him smile. It never occurred to him that other people might be in the street until he crashed into one. The boy let out an undignified squeak, scrambling off the man as fast as he could. Almost unconsciously, he dusted his pants, offering his hand to the man that he downed with a small, apologetic smile on his face. "Ah, sorry Austin, I didn't see you there." The man was old, probably around the age of 50 with a white beard that went down to his chest. He hadn't even moved from his position on the ground, just shaking his head as if he were a daze. He didn't even glance in Luffy's direction, causing the 13-year-old to frown, retracting his hand and crouching down next to the man. "Hey," he said, blinking as the man still didn't respond. "Are you okay? I didn't mean to hit you. I just wasn't looking where I was going in." The man as he pushed himself into a sitting position, eyes dull and cloudy. "You're still young, huh?" He finally spoke, his words rough as if he never used them. "Do me a favor, boy." "Huh?" came Luffy's intelligent answer as he bent down. The man looked up from the ground, his unseeing blue eyes staring into Luffy's very soul. The boy met his unwavering gaze with one of steel and determination. "You have spirit. I can feel it. Reminds me of someone I met a long time ago." I sailed the seas long ago. Back when she was different. Too many people have crossed her and left her with scars, so much blood, so many bodies, too many have used her waters, but they don't listen." "What are you talking about, Austin?" Luffy tilted his head to the side, confused. "You can hear her, can't you?" The old man laughed. "Who?" "The sea, boy," the old man insisted. "Listen to her, she calls to you. I can feel it, you're just like that man." "I don't, Luffy," a new voice interrupted. Luffy turned around just in time to spot Ace running towards him. He grinned, waving his hands in the air. "Oh, Ace, over here." He turned to the man, about to apologize, only to realize the man had disappeared. Where'd he go?" Ace panted as he caught up. "Who were you talking to?" "He was just here," Luffy muttered under his breath before pausing. He thought about the old man and his words before finally shaking his head. "No one, Ace. I was just exploring." "She calls to you, boy." "Listen, the white-beard brat, how exiting, of course. Fate wasn't quite through messing with Luffy yet. After all, what were the chances of the boy finding a rival pirate crew? One that seemed to know him, in fact." Luffy didn't even comment as he tried to brush past the men, bristling when they moved to block off his path. He could feel the pirate captain and first mate shuffle behind him, whispering. The first mate didn't seem to want to be here. His whole aura reeked of nervousness and fear. The captain was a whole different story, however. He practically oozed confidence and all thing that the first mate said. Luffy couldn't completely understand them, but he could hear snippets as both men drew closer. "Whitebeard. He'll kill. Stupid, old man. Know about. Just a kid." "A kid. 200 million berries. I like. Feisty, training more fun. Loyal. Whitebeard. You can't change. Strong." A booming laugh cut off any other argument as Luffy turned to face his assailant, his face carefully blank. The pirate captain reached in and grabbed his hair before he even had the time to react, pulling the boy so he was face to face. "Kids are easily manipulated," he said, though Luffy doubted that the words were directed at the first mate. "If we capture him now then we can change his loyalties." Luffy spat in his face. The man reeled back, roaring in anger. Luffy wrenched his face out of the man's grip, jumping back and getting into a defensive position. The pirate captain whipped his face, eye blazing with anger. He reached out to grab the boy again, but Luffy dodged. Two men came from behind, but he keened one in the stomach and sent another flying with a punch. The captain sneered, completely ignoring his first mate that was slowly backing up into the wall. Luffy was sure that he was the only one who saw sense. "You little brat," he snarled, sending punches towards Luffy in a fury of emotion. Luffy dodged most, seeing as they were extremely sloppy and completely predictable, but one did catch him in the side of the face, sending him skidding back a few inches. The punch hadn't hurt, seeing as he was rubber, but it had enough force to knock him off balance. Luffy wondered if he could just walk out without him noticing. The captain had other ideas, however, seeing as he suddenly received the confidence to rush forward, unsheathing his sword and striking the place where Luffy was standing moments before. Luffy jumped in the air, using the captain's head as a springboard and vaulting over the remaining pirates, offering a sly grin, and he ran in the opposite direction. See ya. You bitch. A large grown man snarled, pushing the woman he'd been harassing to the ground. The woman landed with a thud, let out an involuntary yelp as she fell. Her breathing was ragged and movements were sluggish as she grabbed her injured shoulder, praying that the bleeding would stop. Devil, the man spat, clenching his fists in ill-founded anger. You ain't got anything other than that fucking devil's blood. No wonder you have such a large bounty, Nico Robin. You think you could hide that? The woman, Robin, pushed herself to her feet, blue eyes dancing in the dark moonlight. It was a ghost town, with no one but the man's friends to see him commit such crimes as the light faded from the world. This has how her life has been since she was just a kid, constantly running and fighting for her right to live in this world. That is, until he came. You're going to die here and we're going to take that lovely bounty off of your pretty little head. He stuck his chin in the air as his cronies chuckled darkly around him. Of course this man had no clue that she wasn't just some pretty little girl and that she'd been fighting since she could remember. She'd stayed alive long enough. She wasn't going to die today. Dusting herself off, she stood proudly, facing off the men who threatened to take her life. I'm sorry gentlemen, I made a promise, and so I can't die yet. Gettin' cocky? His voice took a sinister edge to it as he pulled out his sword and pointed it in her direction. Don't underestimate us, girlie. We're your worst nightmare. Ah, Robin said, forcing a smile. I'm afraid that I'm your worst nightmare. Drunk men wouldn't do you good. Ah, what's the quote? You can't pull out a sword unless you know how to use it. It's advice that you might want to listen to. The man's smile dropped, rage overcoming all of his features. He swung his sword, though the woman just dodged it. She crossed her arms over her chest, whispered a word and her enemies fell to the ground, dead. Just like the others. You should choose your opponents better next time, she advised, walking down the streets once again. She turned around, looking up at the moon. She wanted this to be over. She wanted to be done, to just die. But she couldn't, not when she had a promise to keep. Doctorine. A small voice squeaked, closely followed by the clicking of hooves on the cave floor. Doctorine, I got the medicine that you asked for. The 130-year-old let out a barking laugh, slapping her small company on the back, sending him stumbling forward a few steps. Ah, she said, stretching her legs out. Very good, Chopper. The reindeer hybrid, Chopper, gave a large grin and said, compliments don't make me happy at all, bastard. Yeah. The woman rolled her eyes. Now shoo. I have some patients to work on down in the village. Stay here and organize. She threw her medical bag over her shoulder and looked at the cave entrance with a slight glare. Waipal's been taking his frustration out on the villagers and it's a doctor's job to patch them up. Yeah, Chopper agreed with a nod. Come back soon, Doctorine. I don't want to be alone again. Never again. I've been thinking, Marco. Whitebeard rumbled as he watched Luffy run around the deck, laughing and playing around with the commanders. Marco looked up from his position beside the giant man's chair, something akin to curiosity lighting his eyes. We're in need of a new division, yes? Yes, Marco narrowed his eyes just a bit. But why bring that up now? We don't have anyone to fill the commander spot. Whitebeard chuckled. Or do we? Marco followed his eyes, staring at one man. Boy, rather, who was still running around the deck like he always did. Marco's eyes flickered up to his captain, disbelief in his features. He's still a kid. A strong kid, Whitebeard remarked. He's 14. 15 in a few weeks. Whitebeard replied with a light chuckle. He's certainly strong enough and can hold his own. He has an interesting way of rallying his brothers. He'll protect them with his life. He's 14. I know that, Brad. Whitebeard said, chuckling even more at his son's disbelief. He's been with us since he was 4. We've trained him since he can remember. We know that he'll never betray us. What more could we ask for? Someone a bit older. Marco muttered, crossing his arms over his chest with a sigh. But if you really think so, Oyaji. You should ask him, though. Luffy's never really been interested in power of any sort. Whitebeard just grinned, letting out a booming laugh and letting the world know that he didn't plan on taking no for an answer. The party was in full swing by midnight when Whitebeard announced that Luffy would officially become the 17th Division commander. All the crew members had heard the rumors that floated around the boat for a while now and knew it would only be a matter of time before the boy turned out to be something more than all of them. Several crew members were moved into the newly created bunk as the other divisions were starting to overfill, causing stress for the other commanders. Luffy had no qualms with going around and meeting his new division mates, somehow memorizing every name, with a few creative nicknames here and there, while he was at it. At first, Luffy refused the position, much to the amusement of Oyagi and the surprise of the other commanders. But after much persuasion of the captain and, somewhat, of the first mate, Luffy had come into terms with it and accepted. Most were happy with the change, but a few were still a little sour and not quite ready for their baby brother to grow up yet. "He's too young," Ace said, leaning against Marco and pointing his piece of meat at the said boy who was everywhere at once, talking and doing everything he possibly could. Marco rolled his eyes. "That's what I said, Yoi. Come on, guys," Thatch said, sliding next to Ace and throwing his arm around the fire user. "He's plenty old and rather responsible. Plus, it takes a whole crap ton of paperwork off my back, yeah? Kid's enjoying it as well. Just let him be." "He's 14, Ace yelped, throwing Thatch off of him and accidentally setting his shoulders on fire. "Technically he's 15, Marco said. "His birthday officially started almost 20 minutes ago." Ace frowned at him. What time is it?" Marco shrugged and was about to answer when Thatch interrupted. 12:23 on the dot." "What?" The fire user stared wide-eyed at the tiny clock on Thatch's wrist, then glanced up suspiciously at the cook. "Why do you even have a watch? Not like it does you any good in battle." Thatch grinned at him. "It's useful for parties. Tells me how long I have, till everyone gets drunk." "And when does everyone usually get drunk?" Thatch hummed for a second, looking out at the party as everyone had a good time. Usually around 1 or so. 1:30's when they start to spike others' drinks and 2 is when they start doing stupid stuff and then pass out." Ace slammed his head on the desk. "Please don't let Luffy get drunk," while Marco nodded in agreement. "Kid doesn't like alcohol anyways," Thatch grinned. "Alcohol dissolves rubber, Yoi," Marco said. Ace turned to glare at Thatch, noticing the pink tint to his cheeks and the way his words were starting to slur together. "You're drunk." "I am buzzed, not drunk, you idiot," Thatch corrected. "If I was drunk I wouldn't be coherent enough to watch everyone make a fool out of themselves." "Oh? You know that Haruto's doing karaoke right now? She's actually got a pretty good voice, unlike Kingdo. Bad memories." "You should probably go lie down, Thatch," Marco advised. "Before you end up hurting yourself or something, Yoi." "Geez, Marco, cool it." Thatch rolled his eyes, jumping off the bench and stumbling around a bit. He flicked his head towards the party that was still in full swing. "Someone's got to look after those kids, yeah? I'll be fine. Honestly," and with that, he stalked off. "Someone's going to spike his drink," Ace stated. The Phoenix simply rolled his eyes, turning away from the party and looking out into the cooling ocean. "Of course, Yoi." "You tired, Lou?" Ace asked, running his hand through the now 15-year-old's hair. The said boy just mumbled something incoherent, snuggling deeper into Ace's side as they leaned on the rail on deck. "What? Don't mumble, idiot. I can't understand you." Luffy shifted in his arms. "Too much paperwork." Ace snorted, cuffing the back of Luffy's head. "Quit complaining. I'm doing half of yours as it is." "Too much," Luffy whined, eyes still closed. Honestly, the fire user just rolled his eyes with a fond smile on his lips. He looked out to the sea, eyes catching the outline of an island that he'd been warned about earlier when he went and talked to Marco. "You know we're heading towards an island soon. It'll be the first island you visit as a commander. Government will probably find out too and your bounty will get a raise." The only reply he got was a soft snore. A light laugh filled the air as yet another enemy fell to the ground. Multiple arms sprouted from the walls, incasing yet another poor, hopeless soul as his neck was broken with a dull snap. No more rushed at the woman as she stared at the morning's newspaper. The men growled, holding their swords up, yet did not move. The woman was dangerous, even with her calm demeanor and relaxed personality. The woman knew that she was offending them since she had yet to pay them any attention, but why should she? After all, they were just others after her head. It wasn't like this was a new experience. This is how her life is and will always be. But looked at the papers, the edges wrinkled and a little bloody from the small skirmish. She couldn't help but think she still had one more saving grace that had just exposed himself to the true wonders, also horrors of their world. She laughed again, a hand going up to cover her mouth as her eyes sparkled. My, Luffy. You've sure grown up. When was the last time she saw him? Back when he was only 8, no taller than her waist. With his sparkling eyes and dazzling smile. How could she forget about him? He was her guardian angel, even if he didn't know it. Did he still remember her? Did he still remember that promise that he made so long ago? After all, they'd only know each other for a mere hour. Was that really enough time for someone to realize the pain of another? To promise to chase away her shadows? Was that enough to remember that he had healed a heart that was long dead? You're my nakama, Robin. She didn't know if he remembered her. She didn't know if he still cared. She didn't know if he'd ever come back, but he was her last hope in this world. She'd hold on for as long as she could and keep waiting. Waiting for him to grow up, to show the world that he wasn't going to mess around. A feral growl erupted from the leader, making the woman turn her head towards him, her eyes emotionless and uncaring. The man stalked forward, back hunched as he held out his sword in front of him. Nico Robin, I give up if I were you. You're outnumbered. The woman, Robin, quirked an eyebrow as her old, uncaring features turned into teeth stepped forward. Outnumbered, yes. She said calmly, shutting her eyes and crossing her arms over her chest. But outmatched? No, I'm sorry. Maybe next time, Mr. Bounty Hunter. After all, I don't have much time to kill. Oh, a voice exclaimed into the forest, causing birds to fly up and away from the sound. Hockey. Ben. Look at this. A red-headed man was up and laughing, stepping over men that were no doubt still out cold from the previous party that was held last night. The only 3 that seemed to be standing were the redhead from before and his first mate, along with the Shibukai, Mihawk. What is it this time, Shanks? The Shibukai said, voice uncaring as he calmly sipped his wine. Ben looked up at the man he called Captain, but did not talk, instead going back to the book that he was reading before, figuring that Mihawk could deal with him. The redhead's grin could split his face in half. Have I ever told you about Luffy? Ben raised an eyebrow at his captain, looking up at Shanks. He didn't usually talk about Luffy so openly, especially towards people outside of his crew. I don't think you have. Mihawk answered, calmly setting away his wine for the time being. Shanks laughed. Well then, he's one of Whitebeard's brats. Pretty unique, though. I like the kid. Ben rolled his eyes. Everyone likes the kid, Shanks. Mihawk ignored the first mate. Whitebeard's brats? I thought you held no interest for the Yonko other than the occasional talk. The redhead laughed once again, sitting down next to his friend, newspaper still clutched in his hands. I don't, but Luffy's different. He's the youngest on the crew. In fact, last time I saw him, he was only 7, we made a promise. He's holding on to my hat until he completes that promise. Mugiwara no Luffy. Recognition seemed to flash in Mihawk's dangerous, yellow eyes. I've heard of him, now that I think about. Your stupidity is affecting me, Akagami. Shanks just flashed him a grin. Nah, that's on your own accord. By anyway, you won't believe it, the government's in hysterics and everything, Luffy's really growing up. Ben hummed, going back to his book before. Did his bounty increase again? Last time I checked it was at 400 million. I didn't think it would go higher than that until the kid did something really special. Shanks snorted, rolling his eyes. No, not the bounty, but it's something even better. Get on with it, Akagami. Mihawk said, tired of the man's yammering. Luffy's a Whitebeard commander now. Ben's book dropped from his hands and he made a sound of surprise. Excuse me? It's true. The grin reappeared and the morning paper was shoved into the first mate's hands. Little Luffy's all grown up now. What do you want, Sengoku? Sakazuki said as he slammed open the doors to Marineford, a displeased frown on his face. Sengoku only looked up from his paperwork, eyes narrowed as he motioned to one of the seats of the round table where the Shibukai usually sat. Wait for the others. They'll be here any minute. Sakazuki let out a displeased grunt and sat down, arms crossed over his chest. Not a moment later, the door burst open once again and Aokiji and Kizaru walked in, heads held high. Sengoku once again motioned for them to take a seat and they did so without any complaint. Sengoku simply stacked up his paperwork and set it aside, keeping up his formal facade as he does any time when he's in the presence of others. We have 2 rather important things to discuss today. both of them having to do with Whitebeard. The first is Whitebeard has elected a new commander, Mugiwara no Luffy, and has created a new division. This man's whereabouts are currently unknown, but he was last seen on an island in the New World. He sighed. Though this is not the most troubling thing. Kizaru quirked an eyebrow, his lips still puckered. Oh, this is interesting. Would you care to continue, Sengoku? We managed to track down the heritage of Mugiwara and it is not good, Sengoku said, closing his eyes and folding his hands on the desk. He is the son of the revolutionary, Monkey D. Dragon. None of the admirals reacted outwardly, though they were all surprised. The brat had come up on their radar only a few years ago out of the blue. There was no family, no heritage for them to be worried about, but now all of a sudden they find out he's dragon spawn. It was most troubling for them all. While we were searching through Mugiwara's heritage, we found something even more interesting, Sengoku said, cracking open his eyes. Now, I know all of you remember the suspicion of the Pirate King having a son. Sakazuki narrowed his fierce eyes. And what about it? As it turns out, we never found him, Sengoku replied. The woman hunt all those years ago was a complete waste. However, we finally found him. The son of Gold D. Roger, 2nd Division Commander, Gold D. Ace.